let's get started. So this is developing leadership in the SCA. And start with, why should you listen to me at all? What do I know about this topic, right? So I've been a middle manager at my company for about 15 years, and we get quarterly management training. So I've got 90 plus hours, actually closer to 100 now, on management training, leadership, all of that kind of thing. But more importantly, one of the things my publishing company does is we publish books on coaching. And coaching is leadership, is management. If you get the notes off the link on the Google Drive, or if you go to my blog, which is oswynsmusings.com, you can pull the class notes there. There'll be references. So some of the things. This is a big seller book that we do, and many of the ideas here come from there. So Successful Coaching by Rainer Martin. Coaching Principles. Sport and Character. Let's back that up. Effective Leadership and Adventure Programming. Coaching Excellence. Yes, these are all going to be from a coaching perspective, but the general ideas are all there and very applicable. So that's the basis of what I know, why I know what I know, and let's get into it. So leading. One of my pet peeves, and you'll hear people say this a lot, right, is I lead by example. No, you don't. You do not lead by example in any way, shape, or form. You might inspire someone by example. They may see what you've done and want to do it as well. They may look to you and go, wow, that's a really good person. I like their leadership style. I would like to do something the same style they do it. So you may inspire them to do something, but you are not leading them. Leading is an active process. It is a skill. It is a skill you can develop. It's a skill you can practice. And so that is the essence of this, is you need to think about your leadership style. And what this class really is a toolbox. I'm not going to tell you what the best leadership style is. I'm not going to lay out, this is what you do in this situation, this situation. I'm going to give you a bag of tools, hopefully give you some idea when you use which, and then you'll be able to develop your own leadership style based off of those tools. And leading is hard work. You have to be thinking about why you're doing what you're doing. What do the people you're leading, how are you leading them? What do they want? And how does your style and their goals mesh together? So it's not something that's easy. And I know some of you are peers, and I think everybody's an SCAer, but maybe not. By virtue of getting regalia and a pointy hat, you are not magically bestowed with leadership. By the same token, just because you don't have those things doesn't mean you're not a leader either. It can go, anybody can be a leader. And that kind of leads into our next slide here. So who is a leader? Like I said, anybody can be a leader, and it's a skill that can be developed. Leaders are those who help others to succeed. Okay? Leaders help groups work together. Leaders know where there are resources to solve problems. More importantly, especially since we get this less often sometimes, leaders put their own egos aside to promote others. Leaders earn respect and work to keep it. So these are qualities that you'll see in these books, the coaching books that I talked about. Yes, we can point to people who are leaders and they don't do any of these things. And that kind of begs the question, are they really a leader? It is an easy gig to get out of, right? If nobody is actually going to do what you say or follow you, you can call yourself a leader till you're blue in the face. You're not a leader anymore. Any questions or thoughts before we go further on that? None? Okay. And I got my notes next to me. I'm trying not to read straight from them, but sometimes I bounce around and I want to make sure I stay on the slides here. So it seems like every decade, social scientists come up with a different leadership style of what you should do, how you should approach things. But by and large, they fall into three categories. There's the authoritarian style, and it's fine. There's a time when you need it, right? Some of you are in martial arts of some kind. halt, stop. It's necessary. There's no need for debate on this. You're about to do something dangerous. You need to stop. And it's a perfectly fine leadership style when it's needed. The democratic leadership style is more on the order of when you need buy-in, when you want the participants of your group to feel empowered. I said that wrong. They shouldn't feel empowered. They are empowered. You want them to take ownership of the decision, that their opinion was important to this. You may also use a democratic style of leadership when someone else has expertise and you want to bring that into the decision-making process. It's not all about what you want. It's what everybody wants. What can we all agree on, or what can most of us agree on? And then there's a submissive style of leadership. This is when you're more of a resource and your followers more or less know what to do, but they may get stuck on something. So instead of giving them the answer, you might be someone who points them in a direction where they can find the answer on their own, or ask a leading question that pops the light bulb so they figure it out on their own. So you're not actively moving anybody anywhere. They're doing what they need to do. You're just there as a backup, just in case. Excuse me. So
Oswyn,
yes.
This is Odette. I have a quick question.
Absolutely.
Where does servant leadership fall in this? Are you putting that in democratic? Are you putting that in submissive? Because servant leadership is coaching, facilitating, mentoring, and teaching.
I would say a lot of it's submissive. You're not necessarily deciding what somebody does, right? And I'm not 100%
I'm enabling them to make their own decisions and enabling them, but being available as a resource. Yeah.
Yeah. So that to me is a more submissive style. And like I said, there's dozens of words and styles that people have come up with, but by and large, they fall into these three brackets. So servant leadership, I definitely would say, is a more submissive style of leadership. And it works when you need it. So keep in mind, you may need to flow between these. Depends on what you're doing. Like I said, the Marshall example is perfect authoritarian leadership, and it needs to happen. You're not there to debate. It's got to stop, and something's going to be hurtful because of it. So don't read connotations into the words. They're just descriptors. So one of the most important things in leadership, and I've gone way past things. Here we go. Before you lead others, you got to know who you are. And I will probably spend the most amount of time talking about this particular subject. So it sounds HR speak, but mission statements, core values are very important, and they're medieval. Think about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, right? He has his shield, and on his shield he has inscribed his values, courtesy, chivalry, all that kind of good stuff. So he has a mission statement. He knows what he's going to do. He knows how he's going to achieve those with his core values, and he looks at it every day on the inside of his shield. So even though it sounds HRE, it has applicable practice all over the place. So your mission statement should be something along the lines of, I am a mentor because. I organize events because. It should be action and why. Okay, that's simple. One sentence is enough. A sentence with a bunch of clauses on it is enough. It could be 2 or 3 sentences, but it should be fairly short and something that you can rattle off pretty quickly if you need to. Give you an example. I have not made this yet, and we'll see if we can get it in the shot. So this is a pattern for a piece of stained glass that I will eventually do. But on the outside, I have my mission statement, and on the inside, I have my values of how I'm going to achieve that mission for my students. So I have
You're not showing that.
Yes?
You're still showing the slide deck and not showing the thing.
Oh, it wasn't in the camera. Good point. Stop sharing. That's what we need to do. Better? There we go.
Much better.
I can't get it all in camera. But anyway, there's a stained glass pattern of what I will eventually make. And I'll just read it now. It's too far away. So let me go back to sharing. Share screen. Thank you, Odette, for keeping me honest. So I have as my statement, I mentor to instill the courage, confidence, contacts, and character so they can achieve their goals. So my mission statement is something towards my students that they're going to do. Now, your mission statement may be something different. There may be a different reason why you lead or do what you do, but it should be something easily brought down into one sentence or most two or three sentences tops. You're not going into paragraphs here. The core values then are, how are you going to enact this statement? What characteristics are you going to bring, and how are you going to look at this statement? So again, for me, I put down generosity, respect, sincerity, things like that. Let me give you an example from my company. We recently, not that recently now, 3 years or so, got a new CEO. And we went through the process of doing a new mission statement and new core values. So we have as our core values at work, integrity, resourcefulness, effort, respect, teamwork, and stewardship, as an example. Any questions on the mission statement core value part of all of that? So it really is important for you to think about yourself before you lead others. Why are you doing what you're doing, and what means are you going to do it? But the last part in this slide, reinforce daily, is really important. It doesn't sound like it should be, oh, I will remember what my mission statement is, and I'll remember what my values are. That's not going to be a problem. But it helps a lot. Like Sir Gawain, again, he has it on his shield. He sees it every time he goes into fighting, so he knows. And at work, I have our values up on a plaque above my desk. So, well, when I'm at my desk, the current situation has changed all of that, as I'm sure it has for many of you. But I would think about that value. How am I going to enact the value of stewardship today? How am I going to approach problems and bring that value to the fore? And that should be something you think about when you come up with your mission statement and values. Look at it every day. You don't have to think about every single value, but how are you going to use that value? What's going to drive that decision? And that's something that will make you more successful with that. I'll give you an example from the books as well. So Joe Ehrman, you probably never heard of him, but he's a fairly well-known high school football coach. And he has this as his mission statement. I coach to help boys become men of empathy and integrity who will lead, be responsible, and change the world for good. What do you guys think of that statement? Any thoughts at all? No one's asking you, Kat. So the thing that struck me when I read that the first time is what's missing. It says nothing about winning. It says nothing about the sport that he teaches, which is football. He's in it to make these boys, because he's into good people, not to make them into winners. Because he knows if they're good people, they'll probably win more often than not, but they're going to be good sports. They're going to show good sportsmanship. They're going to be honest. All of these other traits that'll help them a lot further along in life than just being a winner on the football field.
It's also everything about what it does for them and nothing about what it does for him.
Exactly. And it's not saying that a mission statement about you is bad necessarily, but that has to be why you define it, right? I do this because whatever. So something to keep in mind. And in all of the coaching books I showed you earlier, which maybe you guys didn't see because I'm not sure the camera was on. I can show them again if you didn't.
We saw them.
Okay. So anyway, know yourself. A tool to help you with that is this one. Come on. So in the 50s, some social scientists came up with this idea called Johari's Window, and they love quadrant graphs. So we're going to see several quadrant graphs throughout the rest of this presentation. So how this experiment worked is a person and a bunch of their peers, friends, whatever, would have a statement, and they would write down adjectives about the person based on that statement. The things they wrote down together in common are in the open area. The person knew it, his friends knew it. Everybody knew that that person had those qualities. The things that the person wrote down but his friends didn't are hidden. he's not doing a good enough job of bringing those out that other people know he has those qualities. The things his friends wrote down and he didn't write down, they're in his blind spot. Maybe he doesn't know he's arrogant. Maybe he doesn't know he's a scatterbrain. You know, there's a couple of things that could be in that blind spot. And then things that neither of them wrote down are in the unknown quadrant. This isn't to say you should use this tool and make everything about yourself known to everybody. That's not the goal. There's things we don't want to know about you, and there's things you probably don't want other people to know about you, and that's fine. But if you are looking for, well, I really think that I'm sincere, maybe. If some of your peer group says, well, you know, we didn't really think that first about you, that's not the word that came to mind first off, then maybe you have something to work on. You have to show, work on your sincerity, or work on whatever talent you have there. So opening the window, making that open area larger, is a way to get to know yourself better by getting feedback from your peers and your friend group. So that leads into, so feedback is the mechanism we take to take things from the blind spot into the open spot. How did I do on that? I really don't know. Well, we're going to tell you. Disclosure is how you move from the hidden spot into the open spot. Well, I never really told you about this thing that happened to me before, or I never really told you about these events in my life. So that's kind of how the discovery works in that. Any questions about how that works or that idea? No? Okay. So ideally, you would take several qualities, several questions, and use different groups and get a larger picture for that if that's what you'd like to do. So the more you know yourself, the more you're able to generate the mission statement, have really good values that you know you possess and can enact. So the next step then is your philosophy. And this does come from from one of the books I showed. Actually, it comes from a book I didn't show, sorry. I didn't grab a copy of that one. Better Coaching Every Season. So two of the questions we already answered. Why do I lead? That's your mission statement. What are my values? Those are your core values. The rest of these questions are going to depend on each and every person that's a follower for you. Coach Gilbert, in his book, when he writes about this, he talks about, he teaches basketball. He has a 3x5 card for every player that he teaches. And questions 3 through 7, he writes down about them. What experiences does this person want? How are we going to define success for this person? Because those of you who are peers or have students, every dependent's different, right? Everybody wants something else out of their experience. So it's not one size fit all. So that's your philosophy. You develop an independent philosophy for every person that's your follower. Now that can sound daunting, right? You've got 100 followers, maybe. I don't know. That's a lot of work. So it doesn't have to be that fine. But if you only have a handful, then definitely make it personal. Excuse me. I already talked about Ehrman and his statement that he's making good people, not good athletes. And this really helps in this situation too. Like every squire doesn't want to be a knight necessarily. Some people just want to fight better. Some people just want to be out there and experience the fight, right? They know they don't have the fortitude to go all the way. They don't want that level of commitment. They want something else out of the relationship than just being at the top. So yeah, success might be different for every follower. The goal is to make a better person. So this last bit, the quote here, this is from John Wooten, who some of you may know more than some of the other coaches I talked to. He is a famous head coach for UCLA basketball team back in the 90s and the 2000s. He developed this idea of athlete-centered coaching, which is similar to what we're talking about here, and to the servant leadership role. So he has at the end of his, I have not taught until they learned. Your job isn't over until they've made it. Until your student, your dependent, your whatever, until they've gotten what they want out of the relationship, you're not done.
It's funny you mention that because I had a boss who I considered one of my best bosses ever. And he was actually an IT manager transplanted from being a middle school teacher of all things. And he was the first person to mention to me the idea of if the student didn't learn, the teacher didn't teach. And that has stuck with me. He was my boss 15 years ago, and this is still stuck with me.
Good. I'm not sure how many of you are seeing the chat, but Odette put a nice link to a book in the chat as well.
Actually, I just put it to you. Sorry, but I can put it out there for everybody.
You can put it to everyone. I see my slide deck and some of you very tinily on the side of my screen. So I don't really have room for the chat myself. So feel free to post that to everyone. But yes, excellent story, Dimitri. That's exactly right. All right, so let's move into the next section then. Any of you read or gone to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People seminars or books before? Okay. Here we go. So like I said, social scientists love these quadrant graphs. And this is one of the takeaways I had and Stephen Covey's thing. Important versus urgent. And so this is definitely toolbox. This is not philosophy straight up in it. So let's assume a child is crying. Okay, it's urgent, right? You have no idea why there's crying. It might be important. It may not be important, but you have to figure it out. So you have to deal with it right now. So quadrant 1 is where things are important and they're urgent. You have to be in this quadrant. They're important and they're urgent. It has to be taken care of. But you don't really want to be in this quadrant. Some of the problems with quadrant 1 is you may not have time to implement the best solution. You have to implement the solution right now. You may implement a poor solution just because you didn't have time to figure it out. It may just be good enough, right? Quadrant 2, things are important, but they're not urgent. This is where you want to be. You have plenty of time to figure things out. You have plenty of time to iterate and figure out the best solution, to debate, to discuss. And just to go back to our leadership styles, right? Quadrant 1 often feels like an authoritative place. We have to figure this out now. I don't have time to convince you that I'm right. We're going to do it this way. Quadrant 2 is where you can do democratic stuff or even submissive stuff. What do you all think? How should we approach this problem? Quadrant 3 is things are neither important or urgent. You don't want to be here at all. Odds are you don't need to be here, but some things do slide into quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 can also be a holding place. It's not important and it's not urgent now, but it might be important and urgent later. And then quadrant 4 is a time waster. It's urgent, but it ain't important. You have to deal with it, but it's not where you really want your mind to be at the moment.
Oswyn, I think the other concept I would place in quadrant 3, are you familiar with what Google calls their 20% time for their developers?
Only tangentially.
Basically, it's an opportunity to work on projects that interest them, and at times these projects are able to come to further fruition, actually become viable products. I think some of quadrant 3 could be that as well.
Sure, absolutely. Like I said, some things in quadrant 3 become more important or become more urgent later. So yeah, it's definitely a planning, let's just goof around with this and maybe something will bloom out of it. Absolutely.
Innovation time.
Yep. Yeah. So you've got a bunch of stuff in quadrant 1. How you deal with that? So one of the ways you deal with that is you delegate. So things that are important to me may not be important to my boss, and vice versa. As long as I'm doing my job well and correctly, my boss really doesn't need to worry about me. It's when I don't do them correctly or well, then I become a quadrant 1 problem and she has to worry about me. And just because it's not important to you doesn't mean it's not important to one of your followers. My boss probably doesn't care who I decide to print a book with, unless I choose something really, a really poor printer. So it's important to me to choose the right printer. My boss has faith in me. So delegation is a way you can move some of those urgent, important things off your plate and make them important to someone else. Give an SCA example. I've led Festival of Maidens at least 4 times over the last 6 or 7 years. I do things by department. And my philosophy with all of that is I want them to know everything I know. So if I'm not available, they're going to make probably a similar decision to this decision I would have made. They also then have the empowerment to do those things. So I can delegate, hey, here's what we have for classes, here's the rooms, here's the times. I trust you, do it. Now it's not on my plate and it's something they care about and they can make it work. Don't just delegate the tasks you don't want to do. Go back to your philosophy statement, your cards. What does the person that your follower is interested in? What would they like to do? What develops them? Just keep that in mind. Try to stay out of the quadrant 1 stuff as much as you can. Those of you who have led events, they happen. You know they happen. They always happen. But the less stuff that's in quadrant 1, the more stuff you're doing in quadrant 2, the fewer things that are likely to pop up in quadrant 1 on you unexpectedly.
I was going to say, unfortunately, as a mid-realm commander, I live mostly in quadrant 1. I'm sitting
Yes.
there going, oh, I can just see Penzic, just, the battle plan only lives for 10 seconds. That was all. I just had to say that because you were reading and I'm like, oh, quadrant 1. I've been there.
Yes, indeed. And battle is that way. I don't know if Belisarius ever actually said this, but in a series of fantasy novels that I love, they attribute it to Belisarius. No plan survives contact with the enemy.
You say that all the time.
So yes, in the middle of battle is definitely quadrant 1, but everything you do prior to that makes quadrant 1 less problematic, right? Well, we know how we're going to react to the situation if they flank us left.
Yeah.
We know what's going to happen to our supply line.
I just had to say something because it was so relevant, that's all.
No, absolutely, please do. Like I said, I prefer a more interactive class, not just me chattering at you. So, good job, thank you. So follow through is the next point I want to bring up. It's kind of a natural, we all already know. You should do what you say you're going to do. Leaders should do that. I'm going to give you the challenge, though, that it's more important for you to follow through with people that you don't know well than it is to follow through with people that you do know well. Someone you've built up a history with probably already understands, Becky's generally reliable. No problem there. She dropped the ball that one time. I'm sure it must have been a mistake. Something's going on. It's not a big deal. That's not how you normally are. But someone who's only interacted with you once, they only know about the one time they interacted with you. And that sticks, right? It takes a long time to recover from having a bad reputation early. So it's extremely important, follow through, but it's very important to make sure that you follow through with people you don't have a history with so that you get that. So as a paradox, because there's a lot of paradox in leadership, deadlines help create a sense of urgency. And I said, but you don't want to be urgent, right? You want to be able to reflect. And yes, but things can't just go on forever. So, giving a deadline at least gives you a sense of something should be done by X point. If you have to reevaluate your deadline, that's fine. Many times work projects, and I'm sure in your work lives, similar things happen to you. We're going to have 2 weeks. I want this done in 2 weeks. And you go, yeah, I think that's possible. And then 10 days into it, you're like, that's not going to happen. So you go back to the client or the boss or whomever, and you go, yeah, we ran into this problem. We're not going to make 2 weeks. What can we do about that? You need to negotiate a new time. So deadlines at least help you figure out when you're going to reevaluate what you're doing, if nothing else. So keep those in mind. Yep, okay. And deadlines also give you an idea of when something stops being unurgent and becomes urgent. Sometimes you have a hard deadline. This has to be done by X. And if it's not, we've got a problem. All right, so on to our next topic. Scarcity and abundance. And this comes out of some thoughts I had about the SCA earlier, probably a year and a half ago when I started this class. So abundance is a situation where you can have as many things as you want. There's no shortage, new things can be created as well, at will. And I don't fight, but I envision this in a fighting scenario where virtually every marshal is also a fighter. And so you show up at an event to do some bouts and you have too many marshals, those marshals can fight, not a problem. There's an abundance of fighting slots available for those who want to have them. Scarcity is there's a limited number of things. You cannot make new spots, things to happen. And in my mind game here, service is what struck me as a scarcity environment. You only need so many people for certain things. You only need generally one event steward. You only need 8 servers, whatever the number happens to be. Having more than those doesn't help you. And so we're going to get into our next graph. Is, well, why do people do things? Why would people want to be in these environments? So we have the graph of desire versus needs. So quadrant 1, high needs, high desire. Everybody wants to do it, and we got plenty of spots for those who want to be in it. Fighters, you want to get into the pit and fight? We got room for you, not a problem. Q2, we have high desire and low needs. So you end up with too many people then. Everybody wants to do this thing, but you only need those 8 servers. Free meal is great, but we can't accommodate all of you. Q3, low desire, low needs. Chances are you don't need this, or maybe you need 1, right? It's generally not important, but sometimes you have positions that are in that category. And then Q4, you have low desire and high needs. These are the jobs nobody wants to do, but you got to have bodies to fill them.
Exchequer.
Yeah, all the exchequers, raise your hands. Yes, okay. So how do we, in this abundance scarcity model, desire, need, how do we push people into Q4? Because this is where we need bodies and they don't want to go there. So motivations. Just like we kind of use moral and ethic interchangeably, though they're technically different. Motivation and inspirations technically are different words and have different meanings, but for the sake of this, we're just going to use them the same way, okay? So why do people do anything? Well, they do things because they like to. They like that activity. They do things because they're good at it. They do things because they like to feel useful. They do things because they've been asked to do it. And that's the important part of leadership right there. All leaders have at least some sort of aura, have some sort of presence, of gravitas, I guess, where I'm going. Like, you know, I would like you to do this, and go, yes, I respect you. I'm going to do that because you asked me to do it. The pointy hats, the medallions, that kind of enhances that, right? To some extent. The king asks you to do something, you're probably pretty likely to say yes, unless you physically can't. Your local exchequer asks you to do something, you might blow him off. So once you get to a certain level, though, and this is, I always get the guy's name wrong, Mazur, there's a hierarchy of needs. Maslow, thank you. So once you've gotten to a certain level of pay, certain level of physical comfort, etc., this last point is a maxim that's almost invariably true. People leave bad managers, not jobs. And so substitute leader for manager, and it works for us in the SCA. People will stop following you instead of giving up what they love. They'll find someone else who can help them do the thing they love. Now, you can really screw somebody out of something they love, too, by really knocking them down. Of course, we all know the bad Laurel story, right? Person at their first event, dressed in whatever garb they seem to have, the the laurel comes up and says, well, that's not how that's sewn, and that looks like crap. And then the person doesn't come into the SCA for 10 years until they finally find somebody who convinces them, no, everybody's not like that. So don't be the bad manager. Don't be the bad leader. Let me make sure I haven't missed anything. So yeah, this is where I go back to talk about lead by example, but we already did that. Sorry. Okay. So there are many reasons why people do things, like I said, in motivations, but there's also people who do things, there are motivations we can't use in the SCA, right? People will do things for physical comfort, they'll do things to absence of pain, pursuit of pleasure, etc. So some of those we really can't get into. But the one thing that works almost everywhere and every time is sincere praise. Is absolutely, positively the most effective, motivating thing. And it looks like we got some more chat things here, which is fine. We'll call them out. Leadership ability. Not all peers. Yes, thank you. So praise. So this is my take on a feedback cycle. Let's say I'm starting to learn leatherworking. That first effort to go on this uphill slide here to get to this internal positive response, right? The first thing I do, I'm like, this doesn't look very good. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm doing it right. It takes a while to climb that hill to go, all right, I'm okay with this. It's all right. I'm all right. The downhill part is, yeah, that was okay. I'd like to do that again, right? It takes you down to the desire to repeat the task. And then you try to do it again. You're like, it still doesn't look all that great. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. The praise wheel in the middle there drives the engine and makes it happen much faster. If you have someone that's saying, no, that's a good first attempt, or I was there, I've done that before, and you'll get there. You know, if you have someone helping you along, giving you that internally, you climb that hill faster. And you climb the other hill to go from desire to repeat to success faster. Status matters, right? It's great for your friends to tell you did a good job. It's awesome for the CEO to tell you did a good job. Sincerity matters probably more than anything else. And I can't stress that enough. You really don't just give out praise and it not mean something to you to say that. I'm probably getting ahead of some of what I meant to say later, but know who you're talking to, know what's important to them. And you don't have to have read a biography on this person. Just a couple of minutes of conversation with them. I'm going to take it from a Laurel point of view, I guess, more. You're evaluating somebody's art, some that they've made in a A&S competition, for instance. Tell me about this. Why did you choose this particular thing? What were you trying to accomplish? Maybe, well, I wanted to make a replica of that. Or I've never really tried this style of technique before. I wanted, I was trying to see if I could master that. Now you have different feedback to give, right? Does it look like the thing, if that was their goal? I wanted to duplicate this thing. That's a different kind of feedback from, oh, yes, I see the technique. Yes, okay. So be sincere, get to know them. Don't go, Roger, right? Yeah, Roger, good job. That's not terribly sincere. So try to get in there. Praise should be in public and in private. Now, that's a fine line, right? There's some people who don't like having the spotlight on. And you need to get ahead of that. I only have one employee now in my department. I used to have 5, but she hates being called out in public. Absolutely hates it. And so, you keep that in mind. But some of the avenues for public praise that I like, the Word Fame Wednesdays are really nice if people are into that. Calling them out in a hashtag. You don't need to shout, and I know, Dimitri, you can shout pretty well. You don't need to shout in the middle of a corridor or a room, but, hey, loud enough for other people to hear, good job. And then in private, go, you know what? I think you really did well on that piece. I liked it. I enjoyed that, whatever that was. Negative feedback, again, unless you're doing written commentary or whatever, should almost always be in private. Let's go into the feedback. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything there. No, okay. Feedback, there we go.
One thing I might suggest too with negative feedback is criticize the action or criticize the outcome, not the person.
Right. Absolutely. There would be, I mean, I can think of like 0.01% of the time when maybe you should criticize the person just because they're a giant pain in the ass. But by and large, most people are good people. They didn't mean to do whatever thing they did do. So yes, it's like your behavior was X. So yeah, management training for those of you in more corporate areas is you take issue with the behavior. It's up to the person to change what they did and how they did it. Your problem is you were late to work X times, whatever. There's the documentation. You're not saying you're lazy. You're not saying you're a bad employee. You were late. They have to do something about it. So the phrase, let's go into feedback. So the phrase, 10,000 hours, it takes 10,000 hours to be excellent at something, right? And what people mostly gloss over when they say that phrase are the words in the middle here on your screen, continual feedback. The other phrase that we like to use is practice makes perfect, right? Perfect practice makes perfect. So 10,000 hours of doing something wrong makes you really good at doing it wrong. So you do have to have constant feedback, either from the process itself or from others telling you how you've done. So in my mind, again, the martial arts have it a little bit easier. You get pretty good feedback right away, right? You block the shot, you didn't block the shot. Someone will pound on that weak spot of yours until you figure it out that, oh, I need to drop the shield because they're going to hit me in the side all the time. So in those arts, you get pretty good feedback. In archery, since I know Dietrich is here, archery, you get good feedback too. I didn't hit what I aimed for. I need to keep doing it.
As long as you know why.
That is extremely helpful. Sometimes it's form or technique or whatever. So you do need more than just, I didn't hit what I aimed for.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, you need continual feedback. And I do a whole set of these on my blog. I have six entries long, if you care to go read it. The high points of them are, it needs to be sincere, which I've drilled upon. It needs to be empathic. We've all been there, right? We've all made a mistake. We've all not done something as well as perhaps we wanted to do it. We all were disappointed in something. You can still give good feedback, but have an empathy response to the person. I remember when I started sewing and I couldn't get that stitch either. It took me a while, but I got there, and you'll get there too. You know, that kind of thing. It needs to be specific. Yeah, I really loved it. Okay, that doesn't tell the person much. What did you love about it? What was good? You know, what really, they need something to work from, and just being blanket statement doesn't help a lot. And it needs to be actionable. It doesn't mean they have to take action. It has to be something they can do about it. Well, if you'd only had access to this one rare source that nobody knows how to read anymore, you would have done it correctly. Okay. I can't do that. I don't have access to the British Museum's artifact room, so that's not going to help me. Right. So it needs to be something they actually could do about it. Sometimes the best you can do is the best you can do, and there are limits to that. So make sure your feedback is commensurate with the person you're giving it to. Often, so how we use that in the Middle Kingdom for sure, I'm not sure about all over the SCA. Often when an award is given, there's some indication as why, right? You received the purple fret because you did this. You received your willow because of that. So at least there's some idea of what's going on there. Taking someone as a student or dependent. I may be I'm ahead of myself. I'm in recognition. Sorry. All right, I'm going to bring up another point that's going to get me in trouble. Feedback sandwich. I hate it. Yeah, you guys hear Gertie talking in the back. My research shows that it's not that great. Some people swear by it. My research shows that people can tell when you're bullshitting them, which is why I'm pounding the sincerity. The problem is it's often pretty easy to come up with, hey, that first thing that you thought was pretty good. It's usually pretty easy to come up with the middle thing that you think they need to work on. And then you kind of slap a half-hearted extra good thing at the end. And that's the part that gets you in trouble. So if you're really good at it, you really love it. I'm not saying it's a bad, what am I not saying? I'm saying it's not considered the best way to do it. Be sincere and say what you want to say with empathy and specificity. But if you feel like the best way for you to do that is in a sandwich, great, make a sandwich. But don't feel like you have to make a sandwich because not everybody's good at making sandwiches. That's what I'm saying.
And honestly, if you want to,
thoughts on this too.
I was going to say, if you want to do that, take that first piece of praise, shift it to the end, and figure out what you want the first thing to be.
That can work, sure. Odette, did you have thoughts?
I was going to say, we use that a lot in the FAIR system. I think it's a reaction from when we had some real issues before my time.
Mm-hmm.
And it is still direction we give because it then forces them to find two good things to say.
Right.
Sometimes is really hard.
Right.
But you should be able to take two things and be able to say them in such a way that they're not heinous. But mostly what you'll hear me, I try not to do the sandwich thing. I specifically say your criticism needs to be constructive, and constructive criticism is actionable.
Correct.
Which
absolutely. So very good. Thank you, Odette.
Oswyn, I got it.
Yeah.
This is Finn.
Yeah.
Went to a leadership class, I think back in February. This feels like a long time ago. And we touched on this. And two things for us that they taught us for feedback. One was a 3-part I message. Dealing with feeling, behavior, and the effect. Okay. So like I was in the feeling that you got when the person exhibited a behavior or an action, mm-hmm. and what it resulted in an effect. Not like I feel that you did something, but I was excited or I was intrigued by the work that you did, and I see that whatever effect that you were trying to give. Another one was SOAR, which was situation, observation, associate and assess, reinforce or recommend for behavior. Like you said, reinforcing a behavior that you want, mm-hmm. or trying to fix a behavior that you do not want.
Yep. And both of those are just specific ways of going about getting to sincerity and specificity and actionability.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Great methods. I've seen those taught as well. And if that's what you're comfortable, like we're taught to do SMART, but it's all the same stuff. Just be specific about what you liked or didn't like. Be sincere in what you did and did not like about it. And what can the person actually do about it?
Yes. And when receiving feedback, just say thank you.
Yeah. And ideally, and some of these things that Odette and Finn have mentioned, and I've mentioned, are tools for people who are not comfortable giving feedback and not comfortable giving this kind of constructive talk. Ideally, it becomes organic after some point. You can engage the person in actual conversation about what's going on. Now, it depends on this, like an A&S fair, you got 5 minutes before you got to wrap up and go judge the next thing. Maybe you don't have time for a long conversation. You can come back later and say, hey, I really like that, what you did. But I'm confused. Why did you choose this? And then you start to have an actual conversation with the person. Now you're less of a person giving them criticism, and now you're more of a resource and and dare I say, friend, right? Now you're someone that they can rely on to say, how am I doing? Oh, I trust your judgment on that. Okay, I'll see what I can do to do better on that. And that's part of leadership, right? To give direction. Let's see. So I don't have a slide on recognition. I don't know why I didn't do that. But anyway, really that's tied up with praise, and your prestige can be part of, so even just being somebody's student or dependent can be a form of recognition, depending on who you are and if someone really looks up to you. So keep that in mind. Just some miscellaneous thoughts now. There we go. So another thing in Stephen Coven's training is loyalty to those not present. Really, this is don't be a gossip, right? If we're sitting around talking about so-and-so who didn't show up and did you see what they wore, and my God, they're a wreck. Chances are pretty good when I'm not around, you're going to say those kind of things behind my back too. So really resist the urge to get involved in that kind of gossip. And if you're comfortable with it, shut it down. It's not constructive to anybody. And it speaks well on you as a person and as a leader. Hey, he could have, slammed so-and-so, but he was above that. He's probably not going to do that to me if I'm not around. And, he did pull me aside quietly and told me about this problem I have, and I'm going to work on that. And I respect him because of these two things that he did. So yeah, try not to get involved in that. That's a bad place to go. I'm going to say more about this though, creativity. Any of you guys play Magic the Gathering? Or at least heard of it?
Know of it. Haven't played it since Owen was a kid.
Okay. So Mark Rosewater is the lead designer for Magic the Gathering, and he does a podcast called Drive to Work, which is very clever because it's when he does his podcast while he's driving to work. And he talks about creativity, and a lot of it is applicable to everything, not just to designing Magic cards. The human brain is lazy. I don't know if you figured this out about your own brain, but it's pretty much true. So yeah, I was running away from that bear and I played dead. Now I'm going to run away from this lion and play dead. Oh, that didn't work out so well. So the human brain is lazy. If it sees a solution and it's going to go, I'm going to keep using that solution until something tells me it doesn't work. And then I have to think of something new. So you often have to change your starting condition to force your brain to come up with a new solution to the problem, or else it's going to fall back into its old patterns. Now, there's nothing wrong with patterns, right? You're in a Q1 situation. We're going to do what we trained. But when you're Q2 situations, maybe you want something different than what you trained. Well, the enemy already knows how we're going to react. You need to surprise them. So, so you change your starting conditions. I'm going to do, I'm going to do it this way this time. I'm going to limit myself. I'm not going to use this tool. I can't use this tool to solve this problem. Now, how am I going to solve this problem? So increasing your creativity in anything helps you in leadership because now you're used to thinking of new solutions. You have multiple dependents or students. One of them's a problem child. The other one's a problem child in a different way. The same solution for the one doesn't work for the other. You need to come up with a new game plan. So really work on being creative. Force yourself to solve problems in different ways. It'll help you in many aspects of life, not just in leadership. Let's see. Same rules, different game. I touched on this a little bit when we're all more or less, and I throw the words around. So we're all playing the same game, the SCA, right? But we all have different things that we do in the SCA. So just because one person is doing something doesn't mean the other person's also like the fighter, right? That's the perpetual squire. Maybe he doesn't want to be a knight. So you coming up and saying, hey, if you ever want to be a knight, you got to do this. That's not helpful to him. You've lowered yourself in his eyes. So we're all doing something different. Take the time to know what the other person's motivation is. Why are they doing what they're doing? Nah, I just out there having fun. I knew it was sloppy, but it's all right. Okay, if that's what they like and everyone's okay with that, there's no problem, right? All right. No excuses and always on. These are actually linked, and this is another one that'll get me in trouble. So the anecdotal story is at Penzic, I don't remember which one. So I heard it, the King of the East, it could have been whoever. King of the East would take off his crown in the evening and it would be marched out on a pillow. The crown is going to bed. The idea being that without his crown on, the king could act however he wanted to, and it wouldn't reflect badly on the crown, right? Because the crown's gone.
Bullshit.
Exactly.
You know who Jake the Snake is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will always be evaluated. You are always on. And so it sucks for a lot of people. But we, as humans, we are constantly evaluating that person, another person. It doesn't matter. They have the crown on, they don't have the crown on, they're in a leadership role, they're not in a leadership role. You're constantly looking at, is that a good person? Is that a bad person? Do I want to associate with them? Do I not want to associate with them? So if you're always on, then you need to be as much of yourself as possible. So one, you're not having to remember what mask am I wearing today. And two, then you should try to be as good of a person as you can. That way you don't have to worry about that mask either. Often when mistakes are made, you'll hear, and especially true of certain levels of peerage is, well, I'm only human. You're supposed to be a good human. So own up, and this is where the no excuses comes in. You own your mistakes. So example, in my example, I guess it was Crystal Ball 3 years ago or so. Local Shire mate, Sophia, was being elevated to the Pelican. And they had called for a member of the populace to speak on her behalf. And I'm looking around like everybody else. Why isn't that person jumping up and speaking? Who is that? Who's supposed to do that? Then we're all going to dinner after the event, and we're in separate cars. And I'm talking to my friends in the car as we're going to dinner. I'm like, oh crap, I was supposed to speak.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, how could I forget? So I let them out when we got to the restaurant. I parked the car. I made a giant long Facebook post of, hey, I was supposed to do this. I didn't do this. Here are all the things I would have said had I did that. So yeah, if you're going to screw up, own it, fix it, and you fix it in public. You may have to fix it in private too. And use judgment, right? There's certain things that people don't need to know about. But at least at some level you go, you know what? You can be very vague booky about it. I made this mistake to this person. We've talked, I've done this, they're okay with it. And, but you do have to own it. You have to do it in public. No excuses. You're always on. Make sure you're a good person. Let me just make sure there's anything else. No. All right, so let's put it all together. So first off, know yourself. Develop a mission statement and some values. Reinforce daily what you stand for. If you need some help to figure out what your values are and what you're good at, use the Johari's window. Talk with some friends. Write down those adjectives. Figure out what's in the known, what's open, what's hidden, what's your blind spots. Be flexible about knowing when to use the various styles. The same tool. Everything's not a nail. Everything's not a hammer. Use the right tool for the right job here. Develop your philosophy, how you're going to implement those mission statements and those values per individual. I think I just flipped it. Yes, okay. Focus on the important as much as you can. Some things are always going to be urgent and you have to deal with them, but try to stay in that quadrant 2 as much as you can. Follow through on your commitments, especially to those who don't know you well. Offer praise, recognition, and feedback. Be sincere, be empathic, be specific, and make it actionable. Own your mistakes and fix them. And leadership is about being better than yesterday, so you can show others what tomorrow looks like. All right, you guys have asked some questions through the whole of it. That is all I've got on this. So do you have comments, questions? We still have some time, whatever you'd like to do.
I got 2 comments.
Yeah.
One, just because you're in charge of something doesn't mean you're a leader.
True.
2, we're a volunteer organization. If you abuse volunteers, they go away and you have no one to lead.
Right. That's the part of how can you tell if someone's a leader? Well, if nobody's following them.
Mm-hmm. Or if all your help walks out on you.
Good points. Thank you, Dietrich. Anyone else? All right. Well, it is a bag of tools. You know, hopefully you found something in here that maybe you didn't know before or had forgotten about. Pull it together. Bring it all into being. I really do suggest the mission statement values thing. I do need to make my thing, but I do look at that diagram pretty often and try to remind myself how to treat my students. So if there's nothing else you do, I would suggest you walk away from this and do those 2 things.
Thank you, Oswyn.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Oswald.